Hello, I'm Ciara Daly, and this is Unite and Conquer, a series exploring the ways the food and drink industry can positively impact people, planet, and profit. Joining me today to discuss the topic of food and public relations is Chris Towers, the founder of Food Story, a PR and marketing firm which specialises in telling the stories of people and the produce which make the Irish food industry so magnificent. Since Food Story's inception over 2 years ago, Chris has helped successfully launch and promote a range of different food startups, from Dublin-based Cream of the Crops zero waste gelatos to initiatives such as At the Pass, a series of online webinars which provided much needed guidance and advice to hospitality business owners across Ireland. One quick scroll through Food Story's Instagram and Chris's love of working with businesses whose MO is to operate as sustainably as possible will become clear. From cafe owners to cookie makers to farmers and zero waste wedding caterers, Chris's mission to make PR accessible to independently owned and consciously operated businesses has no doubt helped amplify their positive impacts to audiences across Ireland. And that is exactly what Unite and Conquer aims to celebrate. So, Chris Towers, public relations guru and extraordinaire, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm very good. And what an intro, Ciara. That's much better than I could have done for myself.
The face of comfort is listening to that.
And,
That's what it was.
and just as you were wrapping up, that's when the imposter syndrome kicked in, and I was like, "Oh my God, is she talking about me or someone else?"
Well, you seem to have picked up a very important Irish trait, so that's great to hear. So, Chris, it's really clear, obviously, from that intro that you're someone who's really heavily invested in the Irish food and drink industry. But before we get into the details of what it is that you do now, I'd really love for you to tell me a little bit about what inspired you to get involved with the industry.
Okay, so I've always had a love of food and cooking. Back to when I used to kind of put meals together with my dad in the kitchen, and but to the extent that he would only ever let me kind of chop stuff up or stir the pot, and I thought stirring the pot was a very important task. But yeah, every weekend we used to pick a different cuisine theme. So my mum would pick it actually, and she'd be like, "Okay, so Saturday night we're doing Chinese or Italian or whatever it might be." And me, my brother, and my sister, I'm the middle of three children, would get on the computer, type up a menu, print it out, and almost put on our own little pop-up for a Saturday night, based on a particular theme. So I always it was my dad cooking a family meal on a weekend that I suppose got me into food and cooking originally. But actually I didn't get into the industry until I moved over to Ireland. So I've actually been in the food and hospitality industry in Ireland for about 9 years.
Wow.
Previous to that, I worked in advertising agencies. So I worked for a couple of big kind of media agencies in the UK. I used to live in Leeds. So I went to university in Huddersfield, did a degree in advertising media and design management. Left there. The next biggest city in Yorkshire close by was Leeds. So I spent 4 years there, kind of doing my first couple of positions after I'd finished university. And then, like many reasons that people end up in Ireland, I met a girl, moved over here, and became an account manager for Guinness, doing their customer relationship marketing campaigns. So I would have been responsible for all the kind of direct mail drops that went out to the older consumers, and I would have activated all of the younger consumers, sending out the Guinness email communications. That was the role I fulfilled back then. And I got to a point in my late 20s where I was like, oh, this is kind of a young person's game. It's great if you're young, single, don't have responsibilities, and you're not looking to kind of get a mortgage. It's a great industry to be in your early 20s. But I kind of, it yeah, it wasn't me.
Yeah.
And it really felt like the rat race, which is something I never wanted to be in. And I think the more I've worked, the more I've realized that I'm not a very corporate person.
Yeah.
So me working for myself was probably what I needed to do all along. I just, it took me a while to get to this point. So I'm 40 this year.
Happy birthday.
and I'd say so Food Story just celebrated its second birthday, as in me working full time,
Yeah.
not having another source of income. I suppose I started it 6 months before that, while I was still working full time for someone, and I was taking on freelance clients and doing it in my own free time, writing press releases at 10 o'clock at night. And yeah, so I left advertising, went traveling, came back, and I was like, I want to go client side, and as opposed to working in an agency. So I thankfully applied for a job as a marketing manager of a cookery school in South Dublin, and that was my first foray into food, and worked for a really interesting lady called Linda Booth in her cookery school in Blackrock in County Dublin, and spent 3 years there full time, and then I went freelance for a period where I was probably there for another year. So I probably spent around 4 years working for the cookery school. And a lot of the people I met in the cookery school, I'm still in touch with now. Some of them have become clients. Some of them are really good friends. And yeah, I remember my first week in the cookery school, we had a guest chef in teaching the 3-month students on the certificate course there, and it was Sunil Guy from Pickle in
Yeah.
Dublin,
Wow.
who a lot of people will know, and he's a phenomenal chef. And so that was I suppose the ilk and standard of people that I was meeting in the cookery school regularly. And then as I kind of got into the role a bit more, and some of my ideas were kind of brought into the school, we did guest chef nights and invited the likes of Enda McAvoy from Loam, who at that point I think had probably just won their Michelin star in Galway, which they got very quickly after opening. I think they were only open 10 months when they picked up their star. So I invited Enda in the school to guest chef and do a kind of demo and tasting night with some participants, and I was kind of blown away by his ethos, his approach to food. I just couldn't get my head around the fact that he only used Irish ingredients, down to the fact that he wasn't even using black pepper as a seasoning because it's not native to Ireland. And I kind of went home that night and was chatting to my wife Claire, and I was just like, oh my god, like that guy's food was phenomenal, and I actually haven't seen or tasted anything like that before. And I was like, what he does is great, but I'd obviously seen from a marketing level areas where I thought they potentially could improve as a business, that I didn't think they were kind of telling their story as much as they could do. So I actually emailed him the next day, or emailed his wife Sinead, and said, oh look, I'm the marketing manager at the cookery school. I have a few ideas for ways that I might be able to help you. I have no background in doing this other than my role at the cookery school. So, I don't have any freelance clients, but it's an area that I'd be really interested in getting into. And could I work for free for a couple of months and prove myself? So I went down, met with them. They very generously put me and Claire up in a hotel for night, and we went and had the tasting menu experience, and that was the first Michelin star meal I'd ever had. And then met them in the restaurant the next day, and they were like, yeah, we'll just roll with it. You propose some things, what we're comfortable with, we'll do, and we'll just kind of take it from there. So I think I worked for free for 3 months, just doing bits and bobs, mainly kind of social media stuff. I think I might have done a bit of PR stuff back then as well.
Yeah.
And 8 years later, or 7.5 years later, however long it is now, they're still a client of mine. So they're my longest running client, and my favorite restaurant until it closed its doors recently. Loam was always the place where I always wanted to eat. It was just a really good fit for, I suppose, how I feel about Ireland and Irish food and Irish culture, and the fact that they were doing such a great job of highlighting local seasonal produce and native ingredients. And I suppose I couldn't have had a better first introduction in terms of my own client than them. And I'm extremely thankful to them for taking a chance on me back then and giving me that opportunity to prove myself. And Loam's now closed, obviously, but I still work with them. Aon, which is their wine bar and restaurant on Druid Lane, and there are other projects in the offing that I will be involved with as well. So yeah, I was at the cookery school and was there for 4 years, met loads of great chefs, and that's where I got my appreciation for quality food. Linda would take deliveries of fresh produce and fish and meat into the school every day, and I would regularly watch her reject and send stuff back going, that fish isn't fresh enough, that, you know, those herbs weren't picked today, obviously they've wilted already. And so I kind of, from that point of view, couldn't have had a better teacher, or I suppose mentor, from a food point of view, in terms of someone who was just extremely passionate about what they did and working with the best quality ingredients. And that has been something, I suppose, that carried with me ever since, through into what I do today with Food Story, as in I want to tell the stories of businesses that have real authenticity to them, and are trying to do things to the best of their ability with, you know, to a certain extent, the best ingredients or seasonal ingredients, or minimizing their carbon footprint by only using ingredients that are very local to their business. So I suppose one thing you and I have got in common is a kind of shared passion for sustainability and the impact that the businesses that we work with have on the local environment, or, you know, the wider environment. And through, I suppose, Food Story and starting my own agency 2.5 years ago, the first client I actually ever had was Cream of the Crop Gelato, who have now branched out into a dried banana-based snack called Bananitas. But Giselle was my first real freelance client before I went full-time. At that point, she had 200 followers on Instagram, and I just randomly came across a post of hers on social media, and I think it was actually Aisling Flanagan from Velvet Cloud Sheep's Yogurt who'd posted a story, because Giselle and Cream of the Crop had tagged their sheep's milk yogurt in some content that they'd put up, and that's what put Giselle's business on my radar. As I said, she had a couple of hundred followers. She hadn't launched the business yet. She was just teasing content out to say, I'm going to be doing zero waste gelato using surplus foods. And I just sent her a DM on Instagram, and I was like, that is a really cool concept. Have you considered doing PR? Because I would love to help you launch the business. And she replied within a matter of minutes.
Brilliant.
Oh my God, yes. I've been on the lookout for someone like you, but I just didn't know, her not being native to Ireland. And I
Yeah.
think at that point, maybe she'd been in working in Ireland for kind of 12 to 18 months, but she didn't know anyone in PR, or she didn't know anyone that had kind of
Yeah.
recommended someone to her.
I think that's something that you find a lot within the industry. There's people who have these brilliant and really inspiring and like truly great ideas, but they are actually just not sure of who they need to bring into their network to help kind of bring their idea to the masses. And that's actually just something that I love about the work that you do, and what has really kind of helped you and I kind of foster a kind of a friendship behind the scenes, even though we're technically competitors, I suppose you could say. But something that really stood out to me about the work that you do is exactly those stories that you tell. And it's very common that the clients that you work with are kind of embedded in that circular economy. And I think highlighting businesses like this is so important, because food systems contribute to, I think it's more than a third of greenhouse gases that are causing the climate crisis. But then on the other hand, we also have this cost of living crisis, which is putting pressure on businesses like that who are trying to do the right thing. And that value of trying to do the right thing within the food industry is something that is massive. And I have big respect for people who maintain that value in the face of, everything that I've just kind of touched on there. So is that something that's very important to you, that you seek out businesses that share those values?
Um, I suppose to a certain extent, I do seek them out.
Yeah.
I'm quite open and honest about the way I work. I suppose
Yeah.
many people maybe wouldn't be so open as to say, "Oh God, yeah, I sent her a DM. I said her this.
Yeah.
I thought her business concept was really cool, and we took it from there." But with a handful of clients that I've worked with, and actually a lot of them, the common thread amongst them is they're sustainably focused businesses or they're zero waste
Yeah.
businesses. I did the same with a company called BSL,
Yeah.
who work with spent brewers' grain,
Yeah.
and turn what would be a waste product into a really nutritional product that can be used in baking, or you can use it in your morning porridge or a smoothie or your pancake mix. So I again approached BSL going, I love what you do. I've worked with a similar business in terms of
Yeah.
zero waste, in terms of cream of the crop, and it's an area I'd like to do more work in. So I worked with BSL and launched their business and I suppose their first consumer-facing product, which was a product called Super Milled Grains last year, and they've enjoyed, not purely based on the PR, but I'm sure it has obviously
Yeah.
contributed. They've enjoyed phenomenal success, and have been very well received by the media and other people within the industry. And I see KTEX is on at the minute, and they've standard KTEX, and they're obviously getting FaceTime with some really influential people there. So I suppose I'm attracted to very driven people with a
Yeah.
real purpose to what they do. And BSL is a business that's run by two siblings. It's a brother and sister duo. So Neve and her brother Rory run the business. And I look at the two of them in their mid to late 20s, or Rory's into his early 30s, and kind of I'm blown away by how switched on they are, how business savvy they are. A lot of the time when I think of something or I spot an opportunity and I'm like, "Oh, you guys should seriously think about that," they're like, "Oh, we've already applied. We applied last week." They're just on it. Their fingers on
Yeah.
the pulse. Now there are things that I spot that they're just like, "Oh my God, yeah, that wasn't on our radar," because I think a role that a PR can play, and actually I'm good pals with Patrick and Russell from the Gastro Gaze, and Patrick actually kind of phrased it well to me in a kind of conversation we were having recently, and he said, fulfilling the role of a PR. You are not just someone that sends out press releases and puts new product launches and businesses on the radar of the media. You are a connector.
Yeah.
You are someone that sees opportunities to connect people, for whether that be collaborations or even going kind of further than that, and people that might be able to maybe go into business together at one stage or another.
Yeah.
And that is a role that I do really enjoy. And I think sometimes collaborations can be quite kind of you can do collaborations, and sometimes there's not a real depth to them.
Yeah.
Whereas I prefer, it's collaborating for the sake of collaborating and going, to be able
Have
to
something to put in your press release.
Yeah, or to have something to be able to put on your social media, or
Yeah.
we're collaborating with such and such a brand on running the competition, and that's there's no real kind of depth to that. Whereas I love to think, how can I take that a step further and build an experience around that?
Yeah.
So last year I connected two of my clients, one of which was an award-winning vegetable grower who's actually based just down the road from me. It's a farmer called Kevin Wallace, and he specializes in a farming technique called Korean natural farming. So all of his produce is pesticide free, or he basically uses natural products to create his own pesticides that he then puts back into the soil. So it's pesticide free in terms of chemical free, but he's actually making his own naturally produced pesticides to help with the growth of his crops. So I connected Kevin from New Leaf Urban Farmers with a really great chef that I launched his business, who's called Cuillon Debris, and he has a food truck called The Soul Project. But he specializes in botanical cuisine. He'd done a course in botanical cuisine, which I think is, if I remember rightly, is the first course of its type in Europe. And JP McMahon from ANIA is a patron of that course. So it's a very well-regarded course.
Yeah.
But I think he was actually on the first degree course that they ran, and he came out and he launched a food truck. Again, this is a business that I approached on Instagram and said, that looks really cool. I remember seeing like a 3D graphic of what he planned his food truck to look like.
Yeah.
And I was like, that doesn't look like your normal bog standard food truck. And the main reason being was the shape, but also the fact that he had, if you know what a hibachi grill is, kind of like a Korean barbecue style grill, on the front of the kind of 3D rendered graphic that I'd seen. And I messaged him and I was like, what kind of food are you planning to do out of that food truck? Because food trucks don't normally have a hibachi grill. And so we had a call and we got into it, and he was like, my menus are going to be very much plant focused. There will be meat on them, but I'm going to hero the vegetable.
Yeah.
And it's all going to be seasonally based. I'm going to travel to different locations around the country, and I'm going to specialize. Each menu is going to be bespoke to that particular location. So if I go to Clare, I'm going to be using stuff from the Burren. I'm going to be using Burren beef. I'm going to be using the cheese from the Allowee Caves, that kind of thing. And I was like, I suppose that was a real flag to me, or a kind of light bulb moment, that I'm actually quite good at, without knowing the full story behind something, going, that looks like it's going to be quite unique. Yeah. And then little do you know, you have an hour-long call with someone and you're like, oh my God, and there's actually so much more to their story than I even kind of knew in the first place, which is why I get really excited about. I get really excited about connecting people, but I get really excited about writing. So once I know all the kind of base facts about someone's business, and that I usually kind of cover that off in I shouldn't admit to this, but sometimes I have 2-hour-long phone calls with clients at the start. Now, we might never need to have the phone call again, but sometimes in a 2-hour phone call, I can literally get every piece of nugget of information that I will need to craft a press release that is going to land well with the media. And then the only thing I'm missing then is the images that I need to tell that story. And I work with most of the time, almost, solely work with one photographer who's actually, funnily enough, based in Limerick as well, called Kirsty Lyons. And we trot off around the country doing these weird and wonderful shoots for, food trucks that specialize in plant-based cuisine, or we've been to oyster farms, we've been to chocolatiers. I think by this point, I've probably worked with about 40 different businesses.
Wow.
Which span everything from, going back to your intro earlier on, zero waste businesses, or growers, chocolatiers, bakeries, but even some people that kind of don't, I suppose, pinpoint themselves across their social media as being very sustainably focused. Sometimes they often are. Like I launched or I helped shine a spotlight on a really great bakery called Dune in Dungarvan in County Waterford. And they are a brilliant bakery. They grow a lot of their own produce. So all of the berries, the seasonal berries and fruits that they use to top their pastries with, or some of the vegetables that end up in the savory bakes or sourdoughs and products that they produce each day, they grow themselves on a farm in about half an hour away. And then what they can't grow themselves, they really look to minimize their carbon footprint by working with either 4 Irish mills that they get their various different grains from and flour from, or, I know that they for the sausage rolls that they make, they get a whole pig from a farm called Newbard Farm, which is very local to them as well. And they will use all of the pig and, they will basically have a very unique sausage roll based on how they kind of prepare the meat that they get from the whole pig that they get in from the farm. And it's that story wouldn't necessarily be evident if you just went onto their Instagram. So often my job is to kind of tease that information out of people and go, well, that's why I think a 2-hour phone call sometimes is a great thing, because they just have to talk, and you'll get a drip feed of tidbits of information that just help give a really great story to what they do. And, a lot of businesses don't realize how great their stories are.
That is something that is so, so, so common in the food industry. There's so many.
Or they don't think they have a story.
And
and I think sometimes I think people think of a PR in terms of like, oh, they're going to get me newspaper coverage, or they're going to get me on the radio, or they might get me on TV. But the connector role is a big part. And also I spend a lot of time on Instagram. Like, part of my role has to be knowing what's on trend and working that to my clients' advantage, but not in an authentic way, not in a way that there's no kind of real depth of message to what they're communicating. But it's also to be like a watching eye over the industry, to be able to make that call. And when someone tells me about their business, for me to be able to go, do you know, you're actually the only people in Ireland doing that? You're the only people in the country going to that level of detail, or working with that kind of ingredient, or producing this kind of product. And so it's my role to be able to go, you're unique in that sense, and
Yeah.
therefore we can pitch you as that when we talk about things on social media, or we circulate a press release on your behalf that gives all of the facts. Like, the opening gambit of the press release will pitch you as unique in Ireland for doing a particular thing. And I love that. Over the 9 years that I've worked in the industry, I've built up that level of knowledge to go, they are the only people in Ireland doing that.
Yeah.
To be able to spot that opportunity and go, well, that's something that you should pitch yourselves at and go after and build a story around. And
spotting that opportunity to build a story is just really, like, although you and I, we work through different mediums, it's that I always notice that, like you, when I first talk to a business owner, they tell me things about their business that I think are so amazing and so interesting, but because they do it every day, to them it's almost become mundane. And you know, our role is to take that out of their head and get it out to the public. And I think that people sometimes have a misperception or a misconception of, you know, the power of PR to do that. I hear a lot, you know, of tut-tuts when the word PR is mentioned, particularly in the food industry. There's a little bit of, I won't use the word snobbery, but it's almost like, oh, she got PR, he got PR. And they're kind of almost discrediting what the business itself is doing. And as someone myself who works in communications, you know, PR is part of advertising. And I can sometimes find the word advertising a little bit dirty, if I'm honest. You know, for years, like, the advertising industry just was allowed to tell lots of lies. And as a result, it's caused lots and lots of damage. And I consider myself to be someone who is quite climate conscious. So sometimes when I reflect on what it is that I do, I can feel a little bit conflicted. You know, at the very basic level, what I'm doing is helping businesses make more money by selling products. And that's a little bit like, that's a negative lens on something that's actually really positive, because in the same breath, like Food Story, a Conquer Digital, we are really kind of trying to make an effort to work with conscious businesses that care. And you'll know as well as I do that in the food industry, particularly in Ireland, for the most part, it's made up of people who are not just trying to make a buck at any cost. There are people who are so uber passionate about what it is that they do, and they really genuinely care about the impact that what they're doing has on the community around them, and sometimes to their own misfortune or their own harm. They make great sacrifices to make sure that their business is the best that it can be, even if that reward is not going to be felt in their pocket. And I'm gone off on a bit of a tangent here, Chris, so bear with me. But there's this sort of kind of like a disconnect here in Ireland, I think, between the origin of our food and the work and the money and the time that goes into making it as brilliant and the best that it can be, and then the price that we pay for it in our local supermarkets. And I kind of feel like that risk is at risk, that disconnect is at risk of increasing, because we're obviously going to see the cost of living continue to rise, and that means there's going to be an added pressure on these food and drink businesses who are trying to do the right thing and who are trying to produce their food and their drink products and their food and drink experiences to a really high standard, even though, as I said, that benefit is not going to be necessarily reflected in their pockets. And that's, I guess, where I really think the power of advertising, the power of PR, the power of storytelling and connecting, like you speak about what you're doing, that's where I really think it can shine, because it's people like you and I in the communications industry who can really help to paint, I suppose, a picture of what it would look like if we continued to support those businesses, like the positive impact that it could have not only on our local economies, but on our health and essentially our quality of life. But I'm not quite sure, maybe you'll have a little bit more insight on this, if food and drink businesses themselves fully understand the importance of communicating those values, communicating those stories, and, you know, using what they have to inspire people and bring them along on their journey. So in short, I suppose what I'm asking you is, do you think that's important for businesses to do? Do you think they should be communicating their values? Or what do you think the importance of communicating their values is, I suppose?
Um, I I do think they need to be communicating their values. I think a lot of people that I work with, and this doesn't just apply to food. Actually, a lot of creative people who can produce amazing things, whether that be food or art, or design, aren't the best at selling themselves.
Yeah.
They're phenomenally creative, but they're quite shy in coming forwards and kind of not pitching themselves as being the best at what they do, but talking about themselves in that manner.
Yeah.
And that is a role. That's the other role I fulfill, as well
Yeah.
as kind of communicating the facts and telling the story. It's being the third party person that talks about them in a way that they don't feel comfortable talking about
Yeah.
themselves, if that makes sense. So, like, I work with a lot of shy people. Some of them know that they need to do PR. Some will scream it from the rooftops, and some are a lot more kind of, we're happy for you to do it, and we know it needs to be done,
Yeah.
and we love that you're getting the story out there, but we're a little bit shy about it, and we're not necessarily going to post it on our social media because
Yeah.
we're just not that kind of people, or person, and that's absolutely fine too. It's a tough one. Like, I suppose the point I kind of didn't make at the beginning when we were talking about how I got into starting my own agency is I always wanted to work with small businesses, and
Yeah.
it wasn't really like a strategic decision to kind of go, oh, I can really carve out a niche doing this. If I just specialize in small businesses, I can create an agency. It just kind of happened organically, and
Yeah.
I work. You work with one kind of business and you do a great job for them, and that attracts 3 other businesses that see themselves in the same way, or they see themselves in the same kind of realm,
Yeah.
and that happens to me quite regularly. Like, I had a call with a new client that I'm going to work with in a couple of months, and they're a small scale producer based down in County Kerry, and I was on their radar because they said, oh, we'd seen 2 or 3 other food brands
Yeah.
that were communicating their story in a really nice, authentic way, and we really liked what they were doing. And then we actually joined the dots and realized that you were doing the PR for all
Yeah.
3 of them, which was the nicest compliment anyone has ever kind of paid me. That's such a nice thing to hear.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I suppose you start off working with small businesses and you do a good job for them, and it gets well received by like-minded businesses and people that kind of see themselves in a similar way. And
Yeah.
so by hook or by crook, I've ended up kind of just working with 40 small businesses to this point, and I don't really have any aspirations to work with big brands. As I said kind of earlier on, I don't see myself as a very corporate person. I don't wear a tie or shirt or suit. I think you put yourself out there as what you're kind of comfortable portraying,
Yeah.
and it will attract the right kind of people
Yeah.
back.
Absolutely.
And I'm very open and honest about how I work and who I work with. And if you go onto my Instagram, you'll always see the coverage that I've got for clients, and the people that I'm working with. So I'm very kind of transparent on that level. You know who I work with, and you know what coverage that they
Yeah.
get, and that has worked well for me in terms of promoting the business, because I have no website. I
Yeah.
exist only on Instagram. And that's actually how everyone finds me. And I've had several people, peers and friends of mine, who work within the industry, who have told me that I need to get a website, and at some point I probably will do. But I actually quite like being a little bit different and going, this is, I'm going to go about things in my own way.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no rule book.
Exactly.
I don't necessarily have to exist with an agency that has a ton of clients on retainer, and I have to constantly churn out press releases for them and try and find excuses or reasons to communicate with journalists about them. I'm quite happy to work with a business once a year on a really high impact campaign that, spans 2 or 3 months, and then I might not hear from them for another 12 months until the following summer when they want to do their next summer campaign. And there's not many agencies that work in that way, if any, which kind of makes me unique. And I'm, from that point of view, I'm not the most commercially driven. I'm probably like the food producers that you were just talking about earlier, or the cafes or the restaurants that they just want to do the best.
Yeah.
I just want to tell really great stories as and when they come my way, or I've kind of sought them out, and people trust me to tell that story. And if I only work with that business once, then great. As long as they're happy with the output and what I delivered for them. Sometimes they come back around, sometimes they don't, but that's kind of how I like to work.
That's brilliant. If a business owner wanted to, you mentioned that you only have your Instagram. If a business owner wants to get in touch with you, how do they find you on the Instagram?
So Food Story Island is the handle, and the email address is very easy to remember. Hopefully it's foodstorychris@gmail.com. And I'm quite happy to pick up a call and jump on the phone and have a chat with someone for
2 hours minimum.
Or 2 hours. Ideally, they would be paid client. But I like to help people. There's a lot that I do that isn't kind of, they're not charged for hours. I do kind of like to go over and above. I'm not your standard agency. I don't necessarily clock off at 5 o'clock. Now, that doesn't mean I'm writing press releases at 10 o'clock in the evening anymore, now that I'm full-time. But it does mean that 9 o'clock at night, when I'm multi-screening with Love Island on in the background, that I'm on Instagram. And ideas are popping into my head. So it wouldn't be rare for a client of mine, as long as they're okay for this to happen, to get a WhatsApp message from me at 8 o'clock of an evening when an idea pinged into my head, or I've just seen something on Instagram that I think is a really great opportunity that might be something that they could avail of, that I will interact with clients because I'm based on Instagram. And I suppose it's very kind of digital focused, the way that I work. I will drop people a DM as and when I kind of come across things that I think will be of interest to them. Or, I obviously interact with clients on a weekend because that's when a lot of them get coverage in the media. So from that point of view, I don't really switch off. But I think you could say that for many self-employed people.
And particularly for food and drink business owners. I don't know when those guys sleep, because you could get texts and emails and calls from them at all hours.
And I think when you're a small business owner and you're working with fellow small businesses, there is that level of understanding of sometimes you won't get all of the information from them in one go. Maybe it will come through sporadically in a drip feed of WhatsApp messages or emails, and your job is just to our job is to make their life easy and to take something off their plate that they don't have the skills to do themselves, or that it's outside of their comfort zone, or they don't have the expertise. But I'm also open to just helping people do PR themselves better.
Yeah.
And that was part of what we delivered in the At the Pass sessions, the online sessions. Ali Dunworth and I delivered a segment on basically how could small businesses do PR themselves and what were the kind of key takeaways. And I think if you see the benefit in doing PR, it is something that businesses to a certain extent can look to do elements of themselves. And as and when I think you've got a really big piece of news or a new innovation or a new product launch within your businesses, or you're moving to larger premises and there's a real reason to maybe get that message out there on a bigger scale, maybe that's when you should look to bring a PR on board who knows what strings to pull to make that kind of happen. So PR is something that you should probably, you should do, not just in terms of press releases and media interactions, but through your social media. It is something that should be part of your marketing mix 12 months a year. And it's about putting the time and effort into doing that and having a plan. Having a planned approach. What awards do you want to go for? Can you put submissions in for, do you want to put one of your products forward for a Blast Nairn award, for example? Just going into the start of the year and going, okay, where do I want to be in 12 months' time? We've got a really great product, but, how can we tell people about that product? Can we win some accolades? And just, having a planned approach to what can we do at certain points in the year within our existing business, within our existing menu that will pique people's interest. What can we do for Easter, Father's Day, Mother's Day, Sustainable Gastronomy Day, Zero Waste Week, and just having a planned approach and going, okay, when this comes up, or 6 weeks out from this date coming up in the calendar, let's make a concerted effort to do something really unique, either to our location or nationally, and having a planned approach, thinking about which are the local businesses or national businesses that share your kind of ethos and values that you could collaborate with. Who can you put a great event on with? So if you're introducing a farmer or a grower to a guy that specializes in botanical cuisine, how can you best tell that story? Well, we told that story through doing pop-up restaurant nights in polytunnels on a farm in the summer. If you want to make that happen, we actually started planning that 6 months in advance.
The forward planning is definitely a piece that I think business owners don't understand the importance of. And to some degree, I understand it. They're exceptionally busy and they're always doing 99 million things at the one time. But the forward planning and the knowing what it is that you're going to do and when you're going to do it and getting all of your, I hate to say this term, ducks in a row so that it goes out successfully is absolutely just imperative. And of course, if somebody wants your assistance, they should get in touch, because who's a better forward planner than a PR professional extraordinaire?
But it's your role and my role is essentially to kind of like organize their calendar for them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and to say, like, businesses are quite happy for me to say to them, well, often the first question is, what is it you're looking to promote, and when ideally would you like to hit the newspapers or the media? And when they give you that date, I always work back probably 2 months and go, okay, within the space of 2 or 3 weeks, I can have written a press release, we can get it signed off, we can have done the photo shoot, and we can have got the retouched images back from the photographer. Because if you want to hit the press here, I probably need to be sending out the press release here. And it's kind of backtracking and working back, knowing that it takes 6 to 8 weeks for these things to happen. And that would be the only other thing to bear in mind if you're looking to engage with like a social media agency or a PR agency. Like, if you have something great, an idea that don't sit on it. Give it the time it deserves and the time it requires for you to activate that and for it to have maximum impact. Because the worst thing is to leave yourself too little time, or even worse is to not to do it at all, and then you see someone else do it a few months later and you go, oh my god, that was actually what we were meant to do and we just didn't get round to it. And you see someone else getting great PR for doing something that you actually probably could have been the first to market with. So plan.
Absolutely. Chris, you have given such a wealth of information today. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this chat. And to anyone who's watched, do get in touch with Chris. Like I said, he's a PR guru. I can't even speak. PR guru extraordinaire.